Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to introduce an important concept in C++, the class. You can think of a class as an advanced version of a struct in C. Not only have different members, but also contains functions and support OOP features, which are encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. In this video, we will first focus on how to define and declare a class, and take a closer look at the feature called encapsulation. Alright, so normally when we define a class, it is a common practice to place the class definition in another header file, and put the implementation in a separate C++ file. This improves readability and organization. As you can see, I've created ATM files here. That will be an example in this video. Okay, so to define a class, we start with the class keyword and followed by the class name. Then a pair of curly braces. Okay, and don't forget the semicolon at the end. And inside the curly braces, we can define the class member and functions. Now let's dive into the concepts of encapsulation. Encapsulation allows us to define member access labels using three keywords: public, protected, and private. In practice, we usually define attributes, which are member variables, and internal helper functions with restricted access. So we usually define them in private section. Okay, and as a naming convention, we often prefix member variables with a lowercase m and an underscore to indicate that they belong to the class. Now, if a variable is defined inside the private section, that means it can only be accessed by the class itself, not from outside. Take this ATM class for example. It has an integer variable, money, used to store the account balance. Since it is declared under the private section, we cannot access it directly from outside the class. Let's try to directly access money in the main function and see what happens. Okay, and remember that we have to include our created class header. Okay, since we are trying to access a private member variable directly, this will result in a compilation error. So what should we do? Typically, if we want to read or modify private variables, we need to provide a public interface to do so. It is kind of like using a real ATM machine. We can't just grab money from inside it. We need a proper interface to withdraw. So here's how we can define such functions in the public section. Okay, in the main function, we can use the public function like this. Okay, let's run it and see what happens. As you can see, it will show a default value not set by us. This way, the program compiles and runs successfully. Now, when it comes to function implementation, if the function is simple, we can define it directly inside the header file. But if the logic is more complex, as mentioned earlier, We usually define it in the C++ file instead. Also, when writing the implementation in the C++ file, we need to specify which class the function belongs to by using the class name prefix. Let's try adding a new function, save money, and define it externally. Okay, in the implementation file, we have to include the ATN class header. It will make the compiler to know where the function's implementation is. Okay, and when we write in the implementation, as mentioned earlier, we have to specify which class the function belongs to. Okay, let's move on to the main function. We can use save money function to modify hours money and then show it to see what happens. Perfect. Okay, so far we've covered public and private, the two main assets specifiers for encapsulation. We will save the explanation of protected for a later video, since it will be easier to understand after we talked about inheritance. Okay, let's do a quick recap. Public means members are accessible from outside the class, and private means members are only accessible within the class itself. If we want to access them externally, we need to go through public interfaces. Alright, in the next video, we will be talking about inheritance in C++. See you in the next video.